Good day, everyone. Welcome to our next series of video presentation in which now we will try to discuss how to write the scope and limitation of your study as part of the chapter 1 of your research paper. So this part will be written after the significance of your study. And scope and limitation consists of two paragraphs only. So one paragraph for the scope, okay, and one paragraph for the limitation. So how do we write the scope of your scope and limitation part of your paper? So let us have the following examples. Okay, so let's try to, let's say, enumerate the guidelines or the information that must be illuminated in your scope. Okay, so we have our first example. We have here the study focuses on the utilization of Chinese bamboo shoots as an apoptosis inducer against metastatic cancer cells. So, based from the given highlighted words class, we can infer that the scope of your study, or let's say to write the scope of your study, it must cover your independent and dependent variables. Okay? You must introduce your independent and dependent variables. Okay? Next. After introducing the independent and dependent variables of your study, we have this next information. So this study aims to test the active chemical components of bamboo shoot that has the potential to prevent the metastasis of cancer cells. Okay, so this part class, this study aims. So what does it infer? Okay, so from this clue phrase class, it means that our scope also states the general objective of our study. Okay, so after introducing your IV and your DV, you must then introduce or state your general objective. Okay, so what is the next information that must be illuminated after stating your general objective? So we have here our next example. It also focuses in testing the significant difference before and after the utilization of bamboo shoots on the number of cancer cells diminished. Moreover, it aims to find out the significant difference between the effectiveness of bamboo shoots and the commercial ones in terms of the number of cancer cells diminished. Okay, so if we have, let's say, stated our general objective, of course, you must also state your specific objective. Okay, so that will be the third information that must be present in your scope of your study. Okay, so next we have the fourth example. So we have here, in order to come up with the study, the researchers used three groups of Sprague Dowley rats as the subject of the experiment to test the effectiveness of bamboo shoots against the tumor. Okay, so class, here we have example three groups of Sprague Dowley rats. So class, these three Sprague Dowley rats actually are the subjects of your study. So the subject of your study is where you will apply your treatment. Okay, it is where, or let's say, to what subject you would apply your experimentation. Okay, where experimentation applies. Okay, and these subjects, whereas you try to, let's say, incorporate your treatments with, will be known as the experimental unit. Okay, so the experimental unit, it is the subject of your study where you will apply your treatments or experimentations. So that will be our fourth information that must be present in our scope of the study. You must cover your experimental unit right after your specific objectives. Okay, now after stating your experimental unit or the subject of your study, you must also indicate this. So let us have this example. Okay, in order to attain the desirable objectives of the study, an experiment was performed in Microbiology Clinical Laboratory of Calayan Educational Foundation Incorporated, Lucena City. So class, this part of our scope, okay, indicates a place. Okay, and this place is known as the locale of the study. So the locale of the study class is the place where you conduct your experimentation. Okay, it is the place where you conduct your research. Place where you conduct research. Okay, so in writing the scope, you must also cover the locale of the study. Okay, you must state where you conducted your experimentation or your research. Okay, so that will be our fifth information. And lastly, okay, to conclude the scope of your study, we have this last sentence. So we have here, the study was conducted within 9 months. Okay, that is January to September. So class, from this, let's say, phrase itself, within 9 months. So what does it infer? Okay, so class, this part, it discusses or it reveals the time frame of your study. Okay, so in writing the scope, you must include the time frame of your study. When will you conduct your study? From when, and up to when? Okay, so combining all these six information in one paragraph, we will come up with the scope of the study. Okay, so the first one, our IV and DV. Then we have our general objective. Then we have our specific objective. Okay, and then we have our experimental unit. And then we have the locale of the study. And lastly, we have our time frame. Okay, so that will be, let's say, how, or the guidelines on how you can write your scope of the study. Now, okay, in summary class, okay, highlighting all of this information in the scope of your study, how can we define the scope? Okay, or how can we, let's say, give meaning to scope? So the scope class talks about the following. So first, it talks about the focus of your study. Second, it talks about the boundary of your study. And third, it talks about the coverage of your study. Okay, so that will be the summary regarding on how you write the scope. So your scope must identify the focus of your study by your objectives. It must identify the boundary of your study, as well as the coverage of your study. Okay, and it is, let's say, written in one paragraph only. So that will be our discussion regarding the scope. So for our next video presentation, we will now be discussing on how to write the limitation of your study.